Nirvana was one of the biggest bands in the world when Radiohead burst onto the scene in the early 90s with Creep. Coming off their debut album Pablo Honey, released in 1993, Creep initially failed to find a sizable audience. However, when the single was reissued, it quickly became a big hit and cemented Radiohead as a band to pay attention to. Amid Radiohead's blossoming success, Nirvana was still riding high following their multi-platinum record Nevermind. The follow-up In Utero, released in September 1993, wasn't as successful, but still garnered a lot of airplay with its lead single, Heart-Shaped Box. Tragically, only months later, Kurt Cobain passed away in April 1994, effectively putting an end to Nirvana and grunge at large. Since Nirvana and Radiohead overlapped for a short time, at least in the mainstream, people often wonder if Kurt ever heard Radiohead. And if he did, what did he think? This is the topic of today's video. So we're gonna skip all the preamble and cut right to the chase. In 2014, an article was published on spin.com entitled, "You Will Ache Like I Ache, The Oral History of Hole's Live Through This." In it, the main topic of discussion is obviously Courtney Love's band Hole and its history. Many of those involved with the band interject various bits of information, including Courtney herself, Eric Erlandson, Sean Slade, Paul Cordery, Mark Cates, and more. Now, where exactly does Kurt Cobain's stance on Radiohead come into play? Well, it actually stems from a quote from Mark Cates. Radiohead was initially brought up by Hole guitarist Eric Erlandson in a quote I will read right now. "We picked Paul and Sean because Kurt would just sit there and watch MTV all day. And he's like, get the guy that did the Green Day album." Those were the videos that were on all the time then. It was Radiohead's Creep and then Green Day. I remember him saying, get the Green Day producer or get the Radiohead guy. I don't know what happened with the Green Day guy, but for some reason we got Sean and Paul. To give some essential information here, Sean Slade and Paul Cordery produced Radiohead's debut album. In this quote, Eric is talking about how they were chosen to produce Live Through This. Anyway, this brings us to what you've all been waiting for. Mark Cates says one single line that all but solidifies Kurt's opinion on Radiohead. He continues the conversation about how Sean and Paul were chosen to produce Live Through This. "I remember it vividly. It was my idea. One day we were on a conference call. Me, Courtney, and Janet Balig. Those guys were old friends of mine. I mentioned them tentatively. I didn't know if anyone knew who they were. But I knew that first Radiohead record was popular in Kurt and Courtney's house." So there you have it. According to Mark's quote, it's safe to assume Kurt was a pretty big fan of Radiohead. It's unfortunate Kurt died only months after the release of Pablo Honey, because if he had the chance to hear the Bends or OK Computer, he likely would have loved those albums too. It's also highly possible if Nirvana had the chance to continue on, Kurt might have taken a lot of inspiration from Radiohead musically. Either way, at least he had the chance to hear Pablo Honey, even if it is objectively one of Radiohead's less than stellar releases. The question of whether Kurt liked this band or that band will always be asked. 99% of the time, we'll never have a concrete answer. But with Radiohead, we actually have a first-hand account to support that Kurt was indeed a fan.